Welcome to another edition of Quoth Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. This is your host, Lewis Bright Raven. Notice, in accordance with the new YouTube COPPA regulations, this episode of Quoth the Raven is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content that we may feature in any given episode is kid-friendly, the context of the episode is to address and educate older teens and adults to inform them of said content for them to research as consumers in service of their youth, i.e., in other words, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, librarians, etc., etc. There is the possibility of adult language present on the episode as well. Rated TV 16 and up. How you guys doing today? This is Lewis Bright Raven. How you doing? And today's episode is the Nobody Freaking Cares episode. Now, why are we doing a Nobody Freaking Cares episode? Well, we're going to get straight to it and go into the questions, and I'll answer that for you. Okay? But it started with some questions I got this week, and it was a little bit annoying. But I'll answer some of them. Something is missing. Okay. Alrighty. That's fine. We'll just do something a little bit different. That's all. Go shared screen. Our first question from Anonymous is, how come you don't do a daily podcast like so many others do? Don't you have things to talk about? Well, of course I have things to talk about, but that's not the point. Most people who are doing these daily podcasts for 5 or 10 minutes are usually doing something where they're basically ranting about something that bothers them, and that's not what I tend to try to do on this show. I see a lot of people picking on and criticizing other creators. And yes, I can be critical on this show, but usually I'm critical of said behaviors by other people rather than work in that respect. And I wish they would change that. So, rather than come up every day with something new to complain about, I do a weekly show and try to do a quality show that has a lot of reviews and interviews with people. It's positive spin on things. I've said this before, but apparently people just don't get the message. It annoys me. But that's what I'm about. Maybe nobody freaking cares. That's what I do, but that's what I do. Our next question, and it's not from the person it says it's from. It's from a different person. Good evening, John Norris. How are you today? Let's see what we got going here with the questions. This is not from Gary R. from Illinois. It's from another person from Illinois. But I understand why I put the Gary R down, because Gary's for Gary Rickelman. Hi, Gary. But it's not you. It's a different person that's right next to you on some of the people that have been following the Armand stuff going on. And someone asked me directly via email about a Facebook post that Armand put where he mentioned that there might be a licensing crackdown on fan art at conventions in the near future. Is that true? And if so, what is my take on it? Well, there we go. There's the question. Let you all read it again. And, well, the article that Armand was looking at happens to be an article from Bleeding Cool from 2016. Here we are in 2020, and basically nothing has happened of that nature, where it was speculated that since Disney had bought Marvel and had bought Lucasfilm and was going to merger with Fox and have all this control over all these properties, that they would start doing what Disney is known to do, and that is go after anybody who uses their characters without their permission in any deemed means they don't like. But like I said, it's been 4 years. We haven't really seen that crackdown. I'm not saying we won't ever see it, but it's not something that is imminent and forthcoming, I don't believe. That being said, Armand expressed a statement on his Facebook page about how he wished that there would be more of a crackdown on this stuff because it would help prevent some of the, I guess what I refer to as Wally's wall of art. The people who do all the art prints, and there's like 100 prints that you can pick up, and it's all, not even necessarily their artwork, but whether it is or not, it's not the point. But it just, a kaleidoscope of artwork just up on a wall, and you pick what you want type thing. Would that be altered because most of that artwork is what we call fan art? It's not official work, not licensed work, approved of by the copyright holders. And if that was to happen, would that crack down and stop these type of artists? Well, the answer, in my opinion, is no, it wouldn't stop them. And what I mean is they'll just switch to something that is more open domain, public domain characters, or just generic properties. And you might think that that's not marketable, but it is, because I do prints and I do sketches of generic type characters all the time, and they're some of my best-selling products. And so if that does it for me, I would presume that would be the same for other people, assuming that the artwork is of a proper level of quality nature. So I don't think that having the characters is really going to kill or save you as far as that goes. The other thing is, people need to understand that fan art is not people making copies of their Deadpool print or their Batman print. That's not fan art. Fan art is one-off illustrations. That's not going to stop unless they're going to put rules that say you can't do sketches at conventions. I can just imagine Artist Alley. No. I think that, again, you're going to get to the point after 4 years of talking, and not really just the 4 years since that article was released. This has been a subject of consternation amongst artists and Artist Alley versus the established professionals that are working in the mainstream to the people who are basically hobbyists. Ultimately, again, what's our catchphrase this week? Nobody freaking cares. It's get what you want, buy what you want. It's the Wild West. And now, does that mean it should stay that way? No. There needs to be regulations of it. It's very simple to do. It's just that the conventioneers don't want to do it. They don't want to put simple rules down. You can stop Wally's Wallarama of art by just saying, hey, you got a limit of 5 prints that you can sell. 5 different images that you can put on display. That's enough for anybody to demonstrate what you can do. You can have other prints available, and you can have them on display in a portfolio, that people can look at. But up on the wall, you only need 5, and doesn't matter. And you can pick whatever 5 you want, as long as they're not, too risque or no nudity or excessive gore or whatever. But family friendly images, I guess you could say. But it's that simple. Or you can sit there and say, well, you can't have prints unless you either have a license for that image from the copyright holder, which is easy enough to get. People complain about it. It's paperwork. It's tiresome. It's a hassle, but it can be done, and you should do it if you're a professional. I'm not going to go into the steps of that tonight. Maybe I'll do that in a future episode with some fellow professionals as guests. We'll talk about it. But tonight, there's ways to get around it. But as far as like drawing a dragon or drawing a T-Rex or drawing a vampire or a zombie or a werewolf, these are common enough character properties that you can do your own thing with and make as many variations of as you want. And as long as it's cool looking and someone likes what they see, they're going to buy it. So I don't see where having character properties is a necessity for print sellers in that respect. The other thing is, if you want to regulate Artist Alley and keep the top tier level people in your conventions, is make a rule. Everybody has to be able to live draw or live demonstrate their craft and do something that's comparable to whatever they have on display within reason. Obviously, if you work 15 hours on a piece, you can't do the same thing in 20-minute sketch. But, you should be able to demonstrate your ability, that you can do what you're demonstrating as your own work live in front of an audience. That's just a common sense prerequisite for anybody who's going to be a guest artist at your show. And I wish that was more of a requisite for everyone who are guests at the shows in that respect. And because a lot of people just sit there selling their computerized prints, and they say, well, I do everything on computer and I can't do it without that. Well, no. You should be able to draw something. It may not be the same style of what you did on a computer, but you should be able to do the same basic stuff. That gives me some idea that you know what you're doing and not just selling something that probably isn't your own. And that's what we're being complaining about in terms of that. So if we did stuff like that and put regulations like that across all conventions, that would be what would temper and restrict some of that excessiveness and correct some of the imbalance that we've seen in the convention scene, in my opinion. Our next question is from Jack, and he was a kind of a smart ass. And his question is, are you going to ever promote the underground zine comics? The real indie stuff. I had to email Jack and talk to him about the situation of what he was really driving at when he sent me that question. I know what he's getting at. I've talked about in the past on this show about my history in the underground scene and when I started 25 years ago, how I was self-distributing books and doing things like that. And I haven't put a lot of stuff like that that's modern up on the show. And part of the reason I haven't done that is the lack of access to it, unfortunately, in my area. But just to satisfy you, Jack, I did pull out some stuff from my collection just to show that, yes, I do have some of this stuff and have supported it over the years. I got Small Press Creative Explosion #3. This is basically a fanzine review zine. And this was from '97, but they don't make these type of things anymore. They do everything online and podcasting instead. That's one of the reasons why you can't find them in comic shops anymore, because we've moved over to the digital world. But this stuff has books like, I'm trying to read it here. Michael T. Dessing's Army Ants #1. Zeno's Arrow, Axel and Alex by Terry Filippo and Daddy-O Press. Different things here. Let's see if I can get you that Axel and Alex. That's this way. There's Axel and Alex I was just referring to. A lot of these things you had to buy back then and today directly from creators, because they're just not available in comic shops. And that's part of what we're going to talk about as well, because why are they not in comic shops? Because the retailers, nobody freaking cares. We can't sell it because nobody freaking cares. Well, Jack, you care, I care, other people do care, but these retailers aren't trying to give us what we want. And then they want to do columns on Newsarama or on CBR or whatever the heck, Bleeding Cool or whatever, and talk about how it's our fault as publishers or our fault as fans that they're failing as retailers. Well, I don't think so. But another example is Playground Zero, the preview book. This is by Sean Ortega from Chula Vista, California. There's different things he had. Badland Enforcers. Southland. Different stuff like that, and I'll show you a little bit of his cartoony stuff. Crush Groove and Yuta Man. As you can see, he's got a lot of different art styles that he can do. This is all Sean's art, not different artists. Family Business and The Dead Travel Fast. These are all projects that Sean has in different stages of development. Whether or not you can get any of them or not these days, I don't know. But that's what Playground Zero was. It's kind of like an anthology. It had all those different contents in there. Another zine, kind of like the Small Press Creative Explosion magazine, is Comic Effect. And Comic Effect was done by James Kingman from about 12 years. And you can go online and look up Comic Effect and get back issues. I did some of the writing, some of the articles in them. But Comic Effect was a review zine for all the different things that they thought were fun. And the idea was to emphasize the fun in comics. And I usually did the independent stuff. In this particular one, I covered Hectic Planet by Evan Dorkin. You may recognize it also as the Pirate Corps. But there's the article, and there's a discussion of their Slade Liber Graphics collections. And we talked about that. And another book that was in there was the Hectic Planet Checkered Past. As you can see, they also did a classic Adam on this page on next over. That would be it's Adam, but it's actually about it's an article by David Loon about Zatanna, the DC character, and some of her earlier appearances in the Adam and some of the other stuff like that. A lot of reviews of classic stuff, so that people would know. Panic #1 from EC Comics from 1954, reprinted by Gemstone Publishing in 96, stuff like that. So we covered that. And then there are the undergrounders, sub-publishers. John might know one of these people. Might remember him from Comic Book Resources. His name is Brandon Hanvey. He was also known as Plan 9 over there at CBR, and he did a book called The Stereos, Battle of the Bands. I don't know if the geekout.com still exists, but this was a $5 black and white story about a little rock band called The Stereos and what they do in a competition they're in. And it's pretty interesting stuff, but I'll go ahead and show you some of that work as well. They're arguing over which song they're going to play for the contest in this. So there's that. Now, if you want something a little more modern that you might want to try and get, Jack, I would recommend Titan from Francois Vignois. I can't even pronounce his last name, unfortunately. It's a French artist. I'll go ahead and pull these out. There's 5 issues. It's from Study Group Comic Books. And this I was able to get through Diamond. I actually pre-ordered them. And John does remember Brandon. That's good. Brandon has a lot of stuff. I could actually do a whole show on Brandon, but if I was going to cover Brandon, I'd like to have him as a guest before I do that. So we'll talk about the stereos another day, hopefully with him as a guest, if I can get him on the show. But anyway, this is Francois' stuff for Titan. It's what they call one color throughout printing, an orange type stuff. So yes, Jack, I do have a lot of interest in these type of things. It's just a matter of whether or not I can get access to them. You're in Illinois. You're probably in the Chicago. You said you were in the Chicago area, and I am familiar with the Chicago area. You've got Quimby's, you've got Chicago Comics, who are very big on the underground scene up there. And when I lived in Illinois back in the '80s, I loved going up there to that area of town and finding that stuff and exploring that stuff. Amazing places. Moondogs, when it was there in the '80s, was also another one. But I think today, because of Diamond's exclusivity and because of the way we've done things, we don't really have the same. We've got underground comics, we've got things, but a lot of things have shifted to digital and print on demand. And so it's not available in comic shops per se. And so it's not on the radar as much. My attitude is, if you know something of digital comics or underground things that you want me to know about, email me. That's what the email down below, quothravenlbr72@gmail.com, is for. Let me know about it. Let me know where I can find it, who I need to contact, because I will do my best to get a hold of it and check it out. Because that's what I'm here for, is to help promote the medium of comics and all of its permutations, if I can, as much as I can. Our next question is from Mike T. In South Carolina. He's asking if I watch Picard, or if I've watched Picard on CBS All Access. Nope. Sorry. I don't watch any of the streaming shows as a general rule. Just don't have the time or the money means to do it. I don't like watching television that much on my computer. I spend too much time on the computer as it is. Watching stuff that is strictly from the computer, like other people's podcasts and stuff like that. So me going to watch, something like Picard, or watching a Netflix program or an Amazon streaming program, it just isn't my thing, to have to spend money on top of it to do that. And my TV's too old, doesn't have streaming capabilities, so I've never done it. Also, in this particular case with Picard, I'm just not that interested, I think, is the truth. Nothing against anybody from the old Next Gen and Voyager casts that are appearing in the show. I think for me, I've moved on, want the next cast, which is Discovery for, right now. And even Discovery, I don't watch, when it streams. I get the DVDs after the seasons are over, which I did watch season 2, just finished season 2 of Star Trek Discovery this past weekend. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's my situation there. The next question is from Sweets to Eat, which I don't know why they called themselves that, but that's what they wanted to be called. And I think it's because there's someone who regularly watches Sweetcast. And I mentioned Sweetcast, which is Clint Stoker's podcast channel, last week episode. And he asked me if did you see the Could Gen Z Save Comic Shops episode on Sweetcast that said teens like to go to shopping malls and that they like brick and mortar shopping over online shopping. Do you think the article that was featured there was accurate? What's your take? Well, the article was from last April of 2019. It was in Bloomberg News, and it was basically what it had said was a lot of teenagers still prefer to go to malls instead of doing online shopping compared to older readership or older generations. Now, part of the reason that is because when you go to the mall, it's not a go get your stuff and leave type of thing. Most people who go to the mall, especially teenagers, are going in a group of friends and they're having a fun and they're making a day of it just to hang out and have fun together. And shopping is just part of the experience. It's the camaraderie and checking out whatever you're going to check out together and interaction. That's part of the experience, and that's why they enjoy it over online shopping. That doesn't necessarily correlate to comic shops, at least not today. But I think if you go into many comic shops, at least this has been my experience in more recent years, when I was a teenager and when I was in my 20s, which is the group that they're calling Gen Z now, back in the late 80s and early 90s, when I went into a comic shop, I might sit there or be in the room, in the store 6 to 10 hours talking to other customers about comics and what we loved about comics and which artists we liked and which writers we liked and we didn't like. But there was a positive energy in the room, and it was like a convention every week, almost going. You didn't need to go to Comic Cons because that's what that's what you had was that convention experience right there at your comic shop every week. Today's experience, I'm 48 in March. I go into a shop. Everybody goes into the shop. They might say hello to the employees. They might not. Typically, they go check the new books very quietly, or they do what I do, and I do this myself. I go directly to the register, get my pull books, make sure everything pulls is what they remembered to pull is there. Find out if the stuff that was supposed to be in arrived from Diamond or not. Then I go to the new books and see if there's anything else that they might have missed. There's usually nobody there, though, when I go. It's like maybe one or two other people. And everybody's very quiet and there's no interaction. It's almost like they're embarrassed to be in the room. They're just there to quick in, get the purchase, leave. Now, part of that may be because we're older, we have different responsibilities. We're there on our lunch break. Hurry up, grab your stuff, go home, go get your lunch, eat. Even when I'm a guest artist at a store, I don't have that same feeling I had as a teenager or early 20-something. It's like, and people like comics and they're talking, but they're in their own little groups. They're not talking with everybody or with each other anymore like they did. I don't know why that is. And I think that's where the situation has changed more so than, and I don't know if that's an age group thing or what, but that's, I think it's that is causing people to do that. And if you're not going to have that interaction at the comic shop, then yes, you're going to move. Why go to the comic shop? Then that's why they shift over to online purchasing, because it's just as easy so to speak, to get what you want and maybe get a discount or maybe not, whatever, and order it and get it shipped to your home. But the reason you go to the comic shop is for that interactive experience. And if so, hopefully, if retailers need to learn, you got to foster that kind of welcome, not a clubhouse mentality, but a mentality where you want to be there because everybody there is cool and talk about something that you like. And I just, I don't see that as often as I used to. And I wish we saw more of that in the conventions and in the retail stores. Okay, our next question. Is from Anonymous. And it's, when are you doing the live draw episodes again? It's been a long time since you did one, like maybe the Inktober stuff. Yeah, it has been a while since I've done one. Last weekend I was supposed to do one. I had theoretically had one planned out. Unfortunately, my dad was sick, and I was taking care of him last weekend. I don't know exactly when I'll get to doing one. I need to start doing that on a more consistent basis, though, and it will start showing up. Hopefully, somebody will freaking care when I do them. But anyway. And that is, I believe, our questions for tonight. So if you have questions, email them to quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com, and please indicate whether or not you want your name and locale read on air. So, hold on a second. I don't know what's going on here. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I had some people hitting my Facebook page saying they were talking and they weren't. Anyway. We'll go into the reviews. As you saw, I did talk a little bit about the Underground Seal a little bit this week. I will do that more so later on in future editions. And hopefully we'll get some stuff. But, I'd love to sit down and talk to some of the undergrounders. If you're an underground creator, get a hold of me. Show me some of your stuff. All right. That's another thing. People have been asking me about when am I going to get more guests on the show. Well, I ask people, and you just try to figure out schedules. So we'll get there. So reviews. Didn't have a lot of time this week to do them like I usually do, but we'll start with The Clock, number 1. Publisher is Top Cow, Image Comics. The writer is Matt Hawkins. The artist is Colleen Doran. The genre is science fiction horror. It was released a couple weeks ago, January 8th, 2020. I just hadn't gotten a chance to read it since I acquired it. I did buy it the week it came out. And what it's about is, within a span of 3 weeks, hundreds of millions of otherwise healthy people worldwide contract various forms of aggressive cancer. The proliferation of this, seeming from a viral outbreak, stumps the best scientific minds available. But after a leading cancer researcher loses his wife and watches his 9-year-old daughter begin to succumb to the same illness, he must race against the clock to end a global conspiracy that could propel the world straight into World War III or worse. I gave the book 3 out of 5 stars, and it's ages 15 and up. This book has been in development for quite some time. You probably can't tell from the cover, but it's signed Doran 16, as in 2016. Colleen herself was dealing with some health issues, and it slowed the development of the book and getting it on schedule. But here's a couple of the pages from the book that are talking about it, talking about the situation and what the cancer is doing and what it's doing to people. And I don't know if you can really see what it's saying. I will try to enlarge it a little bit more here if I can. Nope, not going to let me. All right. Well, basically, it's saying in the panel with the close up of the guy with the glasses on the right, if I'm correct, then by this time next year, about half of the world population may be dead. That's how serious this viral outbreak is. It's pretty decent storyline. I one thing I did like about the book, especially, was the backup feature, science class and stuff. Science class about what the story's about and the weaponization of cancer and eugenics. And this is by Matt Hawkins, the author. In 2016, I went to a biotech conference here in Los Angeles and met several cancer researchers. I sat in a few of their talks. I started asking a lot of questions. One that popped to mind was, has anyone ever tried to weaponize cancer? I was in a room of about 50 people and everyone just stared at me like I was a crazy man. The moderator said that yes, it had been tried in the past, but they didn't want to talk about it. So that's what spurred this book, and that's a pretty wild thing in a way. And he talks about what cancer is and how it's defined. And he talks about different stuff that they do with researching cancer and stuff, and how it could be weaponized and different things, and what types of cancer there are, and where you can go to check out cancer statistics and stuff like that. And I thought that was a really interesting thing because it's not just now the story that he's telling. He's kind of giving you a little bit of a touch base to do your own research about this topic and educate yourselves, which is very interesting. A lot of comic creators just don't want you to know what their source material is and where they're coming from and how they developed it. And it kind of gives you an insight to where Matt was coming from when he was writing this book. And it also gives you, the reader, an opportunity to learn about a subject matter that you otherwise probably either never thought about exploring, or your knowledge has been limited maybe from school or what little media presentation has been given you. So there's that. And I thought that was pretty cool about that. And, Colleen's art is good, as always. I think for me, it's just an interesting concept and storyline for me. But I hope that it goes really well for him. I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know if it's an ongoing or limited series. I do know that number 2 and number 3 are done and are going to come out. I think number 2 comes out in about 2 weeks. So I'll do a little more review on this. But I gave it 3 stars out of 5. Let me see here. Just because it's a good solid opening, but it didn't completely blow me away. But it's a good solid opening to the storyline. I want to see where it progresses from here. So hopefully, I've got some good faith in the creative team on this, though. When number 2 comes in, I'll definitely revisit this one, and we'll talk about it some more. Our next book is Far Sector number 3 from DC Comics. Writer Nora K. Jemisin, NK. Artist Jamal Campbell. Genre science fiction, superhero, political drama. What it's about in this 3rd issue of the series, Green Lantern Joe Moline concludes her conversation with politician Councilor Marth before being called upon to intervene between protesters and the city enduring security forces before violence breaks out. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and it is for ages 16 and up. And here's the book. Again, I love the cover. Basically, um, even though you probably can't tell it very well, she's basically using the power ring to put barriers between the protesters and the security forces so that bloodshed and violence isn't there, and they're pressing on it, and it's kind of a, squeezing her, crushing her. I thought that was kind of an interesting metaphorical image. Well done, well designed by Jamal. I'll go ahead and show you some of the artwork for it. This is part of the scene with Joe and Counselor Marth, where they're talking about. You can see that there's a sort of a strategy chess type game going on here, but they're talking about civil wars and different things like who's above the law, who thinks they're above the law, and why, different social classes, and how they manipulate society. And basically, she's kind of there's several layers of story going on here in the conversation, and they're kind of testing one another as to where they really stand and what's really going on between the council that runs the city that she's protector of and what's actually going on, because half the city is being infected with, again, some sort of virus or something that's causing them to have emotions, which the city never had emotions before, which has led them to create and have different types of havoc and reactions, including violent outbursts and anger and resentment and stuff like that towards the other population that doesn't feel emotions. And there's just a lot of problems, and she has to be the counterbalance to all of it and keep everything on the straight and narrow, so to speak. I found that very interesting, and a lot of people who've been reviewing this book have agreed with me on that. So that's pretty cool. Unfortunately, there's at the end of this thing, she's trying to stop the security forces from using lethal force, or not necessarily lethal force, but physical force of weaponry against citizens. And she tells them, "Stop it! I've got this." Contact Counselor Marth, and they tell her, but the order came from him to do this. So, and that's kind of like the deadly force used against them. And now she is ticked. And Jemison's doing what I guess some people would call another SJW moment, because it has a very serious undertone of metaphor as to historical events in humankind, whether we're talking about Tiananmen Square, whether we're talking about some of the riots that we've had with police fighting in riots, whether it was LA or Detroit or Watts, or some of the shootings between the police and people at college campuses throughout American history. It's very reminiscent and speaking of that historical stuff and presenting that metaphorically. And some people have criticized Jemison for that, and I want to know why. Are you afraid to have someone explore that? Well, we know all that exists and stuff. Yeah, well, it's still going on. It still happens. And all she's saying is it can still happen in the future. So what's the problem? But people are complaining, and I don't know why. But I'm really enjoying this series so far, and I'm giving it 4 out of 5. I think it's right now. I think it's the best thing DC's publishing. Our next book is I Can Sell You a Body #2. Um, I I discussed #1 in last week's episode. I didn't expect to get #2 so quickly in the mail or in stores, but it's from IDW Publishing, writer Ron Ferrier, and artist George Cambides. Genre is fantasy crime noir, and what it's about is psychic Denny Little is desperate and continues to try to do anything to get the people who want him dead off his back, which leads him down an even more dangerous path as detectives are closing in on his activities. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. It's for ages 15 or 16 and up. I'm not really keen on the cover, mostly because, as you can see, it's just a blank white cover with the lead character in the front and another character. I don't know if it's a cop or a ghost or whatever in the background. And the reason that I'm not too keen on that is because last week when we talked about that same series, as you can see, it's a blank white cover with the lead character and some arms, but it's just a blank white thing. And okay, it's similar to the theme, and as you can see, I gave it 3 out of 5 last week too. But it's I don't know. It just feels like it's not completely finished to me. The first issue, it was okay. I could get it. Maybe he's in an alternate world, or he's in Ghost Plane or whatever. But to see it in the second issue the same way, I don't know. I guess they're just trying to be consistent from thematically, but I don't know. It just feels unfinished to me on that, and so I wasn't entirely keen on the cover for this issue. Let's see. All right. Yep. Sorry. The reason I cannot show you interiors is because I don't have interiors scanned. Again, it's kind of a short week in a way. Here's some of the interior. It's in the church, and he's saying there's a guy who's demon possessing, and it's really just Daniel, or Denny rather, messing around, trying to get things going on. Artwork by George Cambides is still solid, well done. Storylines pretty much standard, straightforward. Haven't really. It stayed pretty even keel with the first issue, so that's pretty much why I kept it at the 3-star level on the grading. Got 2 more issues to move it along and improve and get me a little more hyped on the book, but yeah, it's middle of the road book for me, and it's okay. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do any more graphics for reviews, so we're just going to have to go from book to book. We've been talking about shapes in the past, and #3 came out this week as well, and that's by Jason Brubaker and Rick Reckadall. And it's from Cave Pictures Publishing, and it is um, a fantasy, science fiction, teenage adventure storyline. Um, the story's still going on. The lead character gets another kid out of the video game dimension that are that he has been trapped in previous issues, and he realizes that his dad is in there somewhere, and he has to get his dad out. Um, there's issues going on where he's having problems with his principal and other stuff going on, and he's fighting monsters that are transversing from the video game realm into our realm, as you can see. Um, it's still pretty decent. I would go 3.5, maybe 4, 3.5 to 4 on this. The one thing that's kind of funny um, is he's chasing the monster back into the school building, and he thinks he's hitting the monster, and it fades away, and he punches the high school principal or the school principal, and oops. And of course he got expelled from the school for that, obviously, and his mom's chewing him out. And then the monster comes back from out of him because it actually left. It didn't just fade out; it faded out of existence where he hit the principal, and then faded back into existence and entered his body. And now it's coming out and attacking and eating things like his cell phone, which is his gateway product, to our gateway tool to get to the dimension. So whether or not he can actually stop these things or not, we'll have to wait and see. Another one we've been covering lately that I got a new issue of this week was Family Tree, and we get to see that the girl who's been turning into a human tree uh, in her dreams connects to her father who's been missing and had left and abandoned the family. And the reason why is because, well, he had been turning into a tree himself, and he didn't want them to be burdened with this thing. He didn't know that she was going to turn into a tree too, and now they're kind of sort of in this thing together. Um, while in the real world, they're trying to find out what's going on with her and treat her. But I will. This is where she's talking to her father. And they're in the other dimension where they're living inside what is more or less like a giant nest inside of a tree. And that's the tree that they're living in. And you can see it in her eye down here. This is all in her head. And she's blanked out and kind of zoned out of her brain and passes out and hits the floor. And that's how they leave it for that cliffhanger. The one thing that kind of wish they didn't do was make the family tree guy look like Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy, because, well, do a little bit different looking thing. But other than that, it's pretty good, solid stuff. Been consistent throughout. I've been giving this a four-star rating on average, and I'll stick with the 4 stars on this issue as well. I got the last issue of Triage, which we had talked about in the past back in October, and it's concluded for the series. It's from Dark Horse. It's written and drawn by Philip Seavey. $3.99. For those of you who don't remember, it turns out there's one woman who has different versions of herself from different dimensions, 3 different dimensions, and they're teaming up together to stop an evil force that's going to destroy all of them if they don't team up and do something. And ultimately, they do their final plan, and they pass into each other's dimensions and say goodbye to whoever they need to say goodbye to, or finish whatever final acts of conclusion that they need to be satisfied before they um, face the final thing. And a few of them survive, some of them don't, between the 3 and their friends. One of them is no longer got one of her arms, as you can see there. Well, let's see if I can. There you go. You can see part of her arm's gone there. Uh, and I don't know if they're going to continue the story. It was a 5-issue limited series, but um, the last page is now that bothered me. I'll read it again for those who didn't quite see it fast enough. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you think this story was over? No, no, no. This was all just a prologue. Now it can begin. Remember, it begins with a birth. And now there was a little baby in the story and stuff. But the thing is, I'm not saying that the story doesn't need to continue and have a continuation, but to do it that way after 5 issues, tell me you did 5 issues of a prologue, 100 pages of story was a prologue to a larger story. That's kind of a slap in the face of the people who bought the book, in my opinion. So I would not have done that and said it that way. But other than that, I think that kind of turned me off a little bit right there at the end. Um, Overall, from all 5 issues, I would give Triage a 3.5 star rating. This particular issue, I would give a 3. Some of the earlier issues setting it up were better, I think. It wasn't like it was a bad conclusion. It was just there. Best way I can put it. Middle of the road. Also got Heart Attack number 3 this week. We've talked about Heart Attack before. We've talked about how it's very similar to The Gifted and the twins from The Gifted, which are the Fenris characters from the X-Men Marvel Universe, and how the 2 people touch and powers interact and stuff like that. It's still kind of in that same thing. I can tell it's still very much influenced from that, but it's starting to get a little bit different. The artwork is okay. It's I would give it a 3 out of 5, but it's really not going where I would like it to go as a reader. And I know that's that's just the way it is. I don't mean to sound self-interested or whatever. It is the creator's story after all. But I guess what I'm saying is, I was hoping for it to deviate to something that felt more original and not something that was clearly inspired or derived from something else. And it still feels clearly derived from that concept from the X-Men with the Strucker kids. And it just needs something. I don't know what. So it's still well executed. It's still a good read. but it's just a middle of the road book for me. So 3 stars out of 5. We got Cosmo, the Mighty Martian, number 3 from Archie. This is all ages. Ian Flynn, Evan Stanley, Tracy Yardley, Matt Herms, and Jack Morelli did the work on the book. Let's see. This is a 3 out of a 5 issue series. In this particular issue, I guess you could say Cosmo's sort of crush, the Queen from Venus or whatever planet she's from. I can't remember here. Let's see. Yeah, Queen Vesper of Venus is complaining how Cosmo has stopped her plans to rule the galaxy and stuff like that. And what can you do? And there's a character that says, well, why don't we just fight? Instead of fighting with her, like, why don't we just ask for peace with Mars? And they laugh at her. And so she goes and takes one of the artifact weapons and goes and confronts Cosmo. And of course, it basically has the ability to take shadows and light and manipulate shadows to make shadows fight against you. And of course, he tricks her into letting him get close enough to snatch the device from her. So now he's got 2 of the 3 or 4 artifacts in this story that'll give him what he needs. But I think it's pretty interesting that they're doing it the way they're doing it. But pretty cool storyline so far. I would give it a 4 out of 5. I'll go ahead and show you a little bit more of the artwork here. This is where she escapes after he's gotten the shadow spear from her. But yeah, there's that. And our last review for this week is Tales of Science Fiction Redhead number 2. We did cover number 1. This is the story about the redhead who has some sort of biotech put in her, and now anybody within 100 feet of her, their head explodes. It's not the best story. She's still trying to evade things. The science people that are after her, trying to get her recaptured without getting themselves killed in the process, are still looking to reach out to her and contact her and do. And unfortunately, by the end of the episode, her ability has expanded from like 100 feet to I don't know how far, but it's pretty expensive, like a whole forest area. All the animals died within her her thing. But let's see. So that's it's an interesting thing, but it's John Carpenter related type stuff. I don't know if John Carpenter like came up with the idea, but it's written by Dwayne Straczynski and drawn by Jason Felix with Janice Chiang colors. And yeah, it's okay. I don't know, but I'm kind of like, this is issue 2 out of 5, and I'm like, let's get on with the story, I guess. So I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5 for this issue, and we'll hope that it improves as the series progresses. And that's our reviews for the night. We're going to have a lot more next week. Next week, we're going to do a little more extended edition of reviews where we're going to cover like a bulk of issues in a set of issues. We're going to cover House of Whispers from DC Comics and Black Science from Rick Remender and Matteo Sclera from Image Comics. And we'll also cover whatever new books we're doing that come in next week. And we're probably also going to talk a little bit about previews catalog, Diamond's previews catalog, so that people have been asking me, how do I pick my books? And, what do I do to get stuff? And frankly, I was thinking nobody freaking cares, but apparently people do. So I'll go ahead and discuss that and show you my process of what I do when I order books and why next week. So until then, if you want to reach me, you can reach me on Facebook at lewis.brightraven, at DeviantArt at deviantart.com/brightraven, here at YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven, Yahoo Mail, which is the preferred method for this channel, is quoththeravenlbr72 at gmail.com, or if that doesn't work, lewisbrightraven at yahoo.com. Our podcast is usually airing on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So before we go, again, in accordance with the new COPPA regulations, this episode was intended and is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content we will feature is kid-friendly, the context of the episode was to address adults to inform them of said content for them to research as consumers in service of their youth. There is, as always, the possibility of adult language present on the episode as well. TV 16 and up. We will see you next week. Sorry for the shortened edition this week. It just had a lot of stuff going on, and hopefully next week we'll have a really nice episode. We're going to talk about, like I said, the previews thing. We'll have some extended reviews. We might even have some additional stuff going on. Waiting to hear back about some special guests, so we'll see. So until then, we will see you next week. Have a good day and a good weekend. Sorry, folks. Got a little bit of a. There we go.